the truth of it is that leadership is learned. It's not inherent. But for many reasons, you'll find that companies promote people into leadership from single contribution, and don't provide any training. And it happens all the time in sales. It happened to me, right? When I was first sort of lifted up to sales leadership, I happened to be the best performing within the group I was in at the time. And it's just this sort of conferred thinking that, oh, well, you're great at that, therefore you're going to put some magic dust if we let you loose on the rest of the group.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Cogswell. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Cogswell, author of The Cultural Sales Leader, a copy of the book that I have here. So, Richard, cracking book. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Fred.
Just before we get into a real question I have on there, I mean, just general overview. Why did you write it?
Why did I write it? Well, look, if anyone chooses to track me down on LinkedIn, and you can find me, Richard Cogswell. You'll soon find I'm a sales leader myself. I work in sales. I have a day job. I suppose I was really triggered by a number of events that all happened quite simultaneously. The first was actually a friend of mine reached out and asked how, for some advice in terms of how he could run his global sales team. And I wasn't quite sure what to do with this request. And he basically asked me to write it down. So I did. And then I was invited. I was sort of at a crossroads of my career at the time. And I was invited by two different sort of online sales training companies just to have a chat with them. And the first one said something to me which was quite interesting, which was basically that he said only 20% of the companies that he works with have any type of formal training budget, right? For any type of learning, particularly leadership learning, which kind of struck me. And I think we're going to talk about this topic. And the other one was there's a company that's sort of an online MBA company for the leaders of tomorrow of Southeast Asia. And I was on this call with about 40 people, all first-time leaders, cross-industry, every single country you can think of is in Southeast Asia. So a very, very diverse group. And the challenge on this call was to go away and think about the top 3 challenges these people had in their first managerial role. And I was thinking back to when I was first promoted without any training. And it was just amazing because all these people came back and they came up with 5 things that were all common to everybody. And it didn't matter what industry it was, banking, oil and gas, retail, fintech, they all had these challenges of the roles very different. I've got to change relationship with people, both the people I'm leading, but also the leadership. I'm trying to get someone to take more responsibility. All these things were very, very similar. And it just struck me that, you feel at the time, it's totally unique to you, right? They're your challenges, it's your industry. But the truth is, it isn't. You're never really alone. And all of this sort of inspired me really to start writing the type of book that I look for at various stages of my career. So I kind of define this as the promotion, the turnaround when you have a few miles under your belt and you're asked to turn around a situation that perhaps isn't functioning, and then the new start. So I was really looking to build something that I couldn't find at these various stages of my career that hopefully will help others.
Brilliant. Oh, so yeah, it's quite important, isn't it, to have an avatar when you're writing the book. Avatar was old you. I like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
you could. Well, you know how that feels, and that's a really important
Totally,
thing, isn't it?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've tried to write quite a human book at the end of the day because, a lot of sales books or business books can be quite dry. So I've tried to illustrate things with a lot of anecdotes and a few stories from my past, which hopefully, bring things to life in that way. So
Yeah.
yeah, old me, current me, future me is
Future
all
you.
part of this. Yeah.
Well, what a great focus group that kind of just fed you all
Yeah,
that stuff.
it's a
So
good title, isn't it?
yeah, I mean so the thing that I mean, there's so many things we could talk about, but the bit which kind of got me because it is a bit of a soapbox I have as well. But
Sure.
you just said it nicer than I say, which is this kind of concept of like leadership is inherent.
Right. Yeah.
Tell me about that. And if you want to get on the soapbox, you're very welcome.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, I think this is a concept that is very much alive and well, even though it's kind of been debunked many times, right? And there are many studies, if you go on the internet, you'll see many sort of resources that kind of say exactly the opposite. The truth of it is that leadership is learned. It's not inherent. But for many reasons, you'll find that companies promote people into leadership from single contribution, um, and don't provide any training. And it happens all the time in sales. It happened to me, right? When I was first sort of lifted up to sales leadership, I happened to be the best performing within the group I was in at the time. Um, and it's just this sort of conferred thinking that, oh, well, you're great at that. Therefore, you're going to put some magic dust if we let you loose on the rest of the group. And it's simply not true, right? It's a totally different discipline. And this is why that sort of scenario can lead to a lot of problems because, as we know within sales, this concept of single contribution is both a very positive thing, but it can be a very negative thing as well, right? In the sense that if to be a successful salesperson, you have to know where to hunt, how to win, how to put your value proposition across. And the negative side of that, I mean, companies need single contributors. Absolutely. They have, there's an element of expertise in that as well, right? But when you look at that terminology at a more negative sense, and if you see single contributors, promoted to management, these people can also be quite singular, right? In the sense that they know how to do what they do, but they don't necessarily have EQ. They don't necessarily have the ability to coach, to set a vision, to bring a group together, and even all the other disciplines of management, in terms of how to monitor the trajectory of your business, identify where you've got to prioritize, even the ability to go and say to a management, I need this to be able to win. That sort of critical thinking is not necessarily there because suddenly from being very focused and being in a world of focus and finish on your pipeline, you suddenly have to run the whole business in a sense, right? So it's hyper challenging.
No, I absolutely agree. And this just get the best person, put them in that position, they'll be able to do it with just a
Yeah.
completely different set of skills. Like you just said, even just take those three, the first three you said, recruit, coach, towards the vision, the goal that we are sharing as a team. I mean, just
Yeah.
you don't wake up one day understanding how to do that. I mean, there's another podcast in here which is about naturally born salespeople, which I don't think exist either. Yeah, but anyway, that's different. Well, that's a different one. But
Well, I
yeah,
think that's learnt as well,
absolutely, it's learned. Some things in
Yeah.
many things in sales are counterintuitive. What
True.
you
That's
think should work doesn't. So you actually have to learn a better way to do it. So anyway,
that's true.
different podcast. We'll do that one another time. Book two, Richard.
I look forward to that one.
but but yeah, Oh, absolutely happens in sales so often and completely across the board. And I think all the different industries I've worked in, you see people that this has happened to. I might even
Yes.
say inflicted on, actually. I think that's probably a fair turn of language. I don't know. What do you reckon to that?
No, I think so as well. I think back to the experiences I had. And if I'm really honest with you, Fred, I think I was probably acting more than I was thinking critically about the role and by extension the business, you know. Um, I was in a business at the time which was kind of surviving financial year to financial year. And within that, you would have your crisis moments because the trajectory, for whatever reason, has been derailed. Um, and it didn't change after I took on my appointment, if I'm honest about it, right? Because, you know, the temptation in this scenario is you just get busy being busy, right? And you bring more enthusiasm, perhaps. And in my case, you know, I've always had this. I probably didn't realize it at the time, but what I've come to recognize as servant leadership. So I've always had this sense of trying to be able to coach and bring some of what I was seeing as successful techniques to others. And I kind of fell on that because it was a bit of a comfort zone. But you know, if I'm again honest about it and brutally honest about it, I was not looking at the data of the business. So I was not ever going to really make a palpable change either to the way we did things or the culture. And
Yeah.
within that, you know, one of the data points I was not listening to was myself, you know, and you can find yourself, you know, facing a lot of different emotions, many of them negative. You know, you could have things like imposter syndrome. You can have fear of conflict because you've got a very changed relationship. You're probably dealing with some very strong personalities. I was certainly very aware of the changed relationship between me and my colleagues, you know. I was also not necessarily building bridges to win with my leadership because I felt as if I owed them something, right? You know, they've given me this amazing opportunity. They've given me a promotion. Um, and what that ultimately meant was that I felt that I had to earn my spurs, you know, I had to earn my stripes before I could even ask for any investment, let alone any investment in myself. So it actually took me well over a year and a half to be in a position to be able to go and have that conversation with leadership to say, you know what, this is very, very different. And I could do with some leadership training that will help me be better in this role, right?
A year and a half down the line.
At least, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
But I think the other factor here is it can lead to that second scenario, right? Because so many people can ultimately end up failing for various reasons because they don't change the trajectory of the business in any way. And that ultimately then leads to a turnaround where the company is looking for someone with a bit more experience who then has to reset everything, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so they just wasted time, their time,
Effectively,
your time, everyone's
effectively.
time. Yeah.
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 But it happens for so many good reasons as well, right? Because, you know, promoting someone is actually from within is a great thing, right? Because it should show colleagues that, you know, there is an advancement path, right? And it is ultimately, you know, a reward for someone who's performing well, you know, to be promoted. But as we've been discussing, you're pretty much pushed out the plane, right? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that seems to be something that happens everywhere or the majority of the time.
Yeah. It's interesting coming back to what you said though, where you were playing the role. You weren't filling the role. You were
Right.
playing you kind of were doing boss-like things, which you've seen your boss do, who'd probably not had
Yeah.
any training either, and
Yeah.
had sort of existed or survived on doing this and busy being busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what one of the things I see quite a lot, I don't know if you did this, is back to your comfort zone. So I
Absolutely.
don't know how to lead. If I don't know how to lead. So actually, it's blissful ignorance. So
Mm.
oh, I'll go and help that person over there doing the stuff that I know, and I'll come in and I'll save. deals and win stuff and just give bigger discounts and
No,
and all that kind of busyness stuff
yeah.
that isn't really helping anybody in the long, grand scheme of
And
things.
and this also leads into, you know, something I'm also very passionate about, which, you know, one of the first things I did when I got the role, I mean, yes, you're working for someone, but at the point where you take the reins, you're thinking, well, what was the plan, right? And then you start looking around for where was the sales plan? Was it actually articulated? And the realization that there isn't one, right? That you have your financial targets, right? And obviously, you know, you've got your product set and you've got your sales team, however they're configured with whatever focuses they have. But, you know, I've worked in so many organizations where ultimately that's it. There is no articulated go-to-market plan,
Hmm.
right? And, you know, I do remember being a little bit shocked when I kind of was like, you know, okay, well, where's my predecessors? Can I use that as a template and build upon it, right? And to find there was nothing. And, you know, so it's really, I suppose this can go one of two ways, right? One is that someone's not set up for success, and ultimately they may well bounce out of the company, out of the business, out of the role. But then in my case, it was starting to trigger a lot of questions. It was like, well, how do I better bring a disparate group of people together in more harmony? Because, you know, sometimes I think that the terminology of sales team is a bit of a misnomer sometimes, because quite often these groups are filled with, you know, quite extreme and strong personalities. And in truth, often they're not incredibly bound to a mission. And then the second thing is, you know, being able to analyze your business, not just in terms of, you know, pipeline and where you need a focus, right? But in terms of, okay, what are our winning use cases? What are our, you know, um, winning products? Where are those lacking? How do you build a sort of, you know, a data-driven approach to improving them? Um, how do you focus people, right? How do you not neglect, you know, existing customers and build solid plans around those? So over time, you know, my journey has been one of trying to really fuse a solid, you know, well-known, articulated go-to-market that everybody understands, including cross-functional areas, to a culture build, right? Um, but yeah, I think this is also the problem, because if you are, you know, promoting people without training, without some sensibility of actually this is a very strategic role, you know, what I was saying, it becomes the lived experience. You basically are, you know, the management is basically saying, well, let's try this effectively. It's a roulette wheel type of experience. This may or may not pay off, but the financial year to financial year sort of survival thing doesn't change, and unless you can really help people and support them to do more effectively with the role.
Yeah. It's Yeah, I mean, I feel so much in agreement on all these things. Yeah, and you know, you talked about servant leadership,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I also came across this, and it was also an eye opener when I was able to put a label on something that I'd sort of kind of, I don't know, I didn't understand, but you know what I mean. You sort of felt it,
yeah.
and then I started looking at it a bit more. I remember visiting a mate of mine who was in the army, and he got one book on his shelf. Yeah, he was infantry, um, and it was serve to lead. Yeah, which
Okay,
is what you
yeah,
get when you leave Sandhurst. And that's what we're saying there is like, we're going to make you an officer. Off you go and be an officer. I mean, that does not happen, does it? It is you are now
no,
going to this college to learn these skills to do this thing. Because how
correct,
on earth can we expect you to do that? You know, I know military analogies and sales, we sometimes don't like them, but here we're talking about learning how to do a very distinct job where the
correct,
people that you will be managing are excellent at what they do, and it's about getting results through them. And it's
correct.
your job to get results through people. I mean, that's how I think about management now. It's just as simple as that: results through people. But
Yes,
nobody tells you that. You going with my job's to get results. My job, I've got to get results. You said win, value
correct.
prop, that. to, I've got to get other people doing that stuff. And it's
Yes.
almost as simple as that.
But
Okay.
it is a total mind switch, right? And this is again why, if you think about single contributors, sometimes, their behaviors and their personalities really aren't set up to think that way, and I'm sure, the longer you're in sales, you'll recognize examples of this, and an inability maybe to share, you know. I when I was learning how to sell, I would always try to find the people who were most expert in the business and try and learn from them, and then try to adapt their approaches into mine. But it was always very educational when you would come across someone who wouldn't want to share their IP, or didn't know how to, perhaps, right? Because it wasn't in their DNA. Um, but yeah, I think over time, I've come to learn that not only is that an approach I've taken to leadership, but it's actually, to my mind, the most effective one. But again, to your point, the comfort zone type of thing. If you're first promoted, you think you probably have to drive things, right? And that's where you get either one of two things, I guess. One is, the potential for someone to be very micromanaging, which does not inspire creativity or creative thinking, and that can lead to very sort of KPI driven environments. And I know this is a topic people will get heated about, but and in some sales environments, KPI driven environments make sense. But I've spent most of my career in B2B, complex sales with long sales cycles, and to my mind, you can drive much better results if you're creating behaviors that create culture that lead to results, as opposed to how many calls lead to how many meetings, lead to how many sales, right? Um, and and that sort of a mentality that actually you can do more good by getting out of your people's way and ensuring that they have all the tools and resources and perhaps investment to succeed, is it is a leap of, it is a journey. And again, this is why this sort of leadership is inherent. No need to train people is such a dangerous concept in many ways. And as I've become more evolved, I think, the real power in creating, a behavior-led culture that is fused to a very well articulated and well aligned go-to-market plan, is that you can effectively confer trust on people, and within that, confer on them the responsibility to be thinking, creatively about their businesses, which then frees you to start to think beyond your current financial year, and perhaps even to start to show that, to the business. So you can start to think about, okay, what would be the impact of this enhancement to this product, or what would be the impact of going into this market? What does that look like to our P&L over the journey? And then you're starting to actually show something quite different to that sort of survival piece that people will want to stay for, and literally will fuse people's passions, to that journey.
I've got really got to be careful I don't put my own filters on this, because what you've just
Sure.
described sounds a lot more attractive than the do this number of calls to get this number of meetings to sell this number of
Right.
things, KPI, bam, 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 bam. And that seems to be, I mean, very complex in one part of the sales world. I mean, SaaS tech, they kind of live in that. And that's something that's been troubling me quite a lot until I've thought, you
Mm.
know what, that's not my world. I just work with other people anyway. Um, but you've summed it so nicely where you've talked about getting out of their way.
Mm.
Because where I see that they probably got themselves into a bit of a mess is that it's do it my way. Or not in my way, do it the way. That is the way we know, because that's how it's been done. This is predictable
Yeah.
revenue. That is how we do things around here. And nobody seems to be able to shift off this. I think they probably know it's not right and it's getting harder and that people are getting fed up. And I sort of look at it, I see people struggling there, and I think this is so sad because when you look at some people who sell other stuff, they're actually having a really good time. It's interesting. They're having fun. They are bringing
Sales should
themselves
be
to the
fun.
party, and
Yeah,
they're just sort of doing stuff that just
yeah.
I don't know. Again, there's a bit of me in that comment. Of course there is, but
No,
that's how I'm
I'm,
seeing it more and more. It's like this divide that's starting to happen, or maybe I'm just realizing
yeah.
it more. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I'm a true believer in this, actually. I mean, sales and sales leadership should be fun. And if it's not, there's an issue and you better diagnose that pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
I think, obviously we're talking about, first time leaders and leadership without training. But, if you step into the next phase of that, where potentially you're being invited to come in and turn around a situation, or you're walking into an environment where, you're being told the performance isn't where it should be, you're perhaps being told that there are people problems and, cultural issues, that's again where I think this idea of servant leadership is again very powerful, because I think one of the first things you've got to do there, and I try to break this down in the book as well, how do you
Mm.
become expert about your business so that you can then set direction and communicate that? One of those elements obviously is to understand the people who you've got, who's with you, who's against you, you know, um, what skills you may or may not have. And, you know, there's something that was said by a guy called Darren Mitchell, who runs a podcast out of Australia, who says, the goal of a leader, or a goal of a great leader, is to make themselves redundant.
Mm.
Now, that's very emotive language, right? Because, suddenly you're thinking, well, no, hang on a minute, that's not right. I don't want to be made redundant, or whatever it is. But what he's really saying there, you know, or my take on it at least, is that what you're looking for are the other leaders in that unit, right? And, I recall the last time I went into a turnaround situation. It was a business in Singapore about 3 years ago, American owned, but the team was very isolated, not performing, some issues around, negative behaviors and what have you. And literally, I went in a week before I joined that company. I asked to go in and meet the people, and just try to get a sense of them, give them a sense of me, my values, what I believe in, and just get a feel for the morale and what have you. And you know you're going to pick up a lot of stuff there. I was shocked to find hostility in certain people. But I was also looking for, okay, that you're someone I can build around, and you're someone who has the potential, because I believe our values are aligned. I believe our ambitions are aligned. The way that we work seems to be aligned. You're the one I'm going to try to extend my culture to. And then by extension, you're going to extend that, because, you've got to reset everything at that point. So again, I think that comes into this concept of servant leadership, and finding and promoting, not necessarily promoting in monetary or title terms, but at least conferring some level of I'm gonna use you as my two in charge, or to use your military uh, analogy, the sergeant, corporal, what have you, the NCO unit.
Oh yeah, yeah. Do you know what do you know what the boss wants? Do you know what the boss's boss wants? That's something they do in the military world. But okay, we've got 5 minutes left. Um,
Okay, that's
so I'm
gone
gonna I'm
very
gonna
good.
kind of do one of those kind of weird little questions. It's a bit
Yeah,
false because there aren't only 5 things we could put into management training.
sure.
But let's just play the game. And what we're saying is basically first time leaders need to be told what to do and how this thing works and what it's all about. So we're allowed to put 5 things into this training that they're going to get.
Okay.
I, I think we've probably already put servant leadership in, haven't we? As an understanding of this is a mindset and a way of doing something. Yeah,
Yeah,
are we adding that to the mix?
I
That's
think
in straight away.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's probably number one, because that comes with this mental switch you're going to have to make.
yep. Okay. What else then? We've talked about that a little bit. We've got 4 more bits we can put in.
So I think, you've got to manage. I think, you've got to be aware and manage yourself as a data point, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's one that often gets neglected. So I think, however you want to term that, you know, me.
Well, no, well, I put EQ because then I thought
EQ
we
is
could. So what we're
good.
doing there is we're understanding ourselves and how to manage it, but also others and how to manage them and empathize. So actually,
Well, let's
we've
call it
nailed a load of stuff with
internalized
that.
EQ.
Emotional intelligence. Let's get that in.
Yeah, but I think that goes two ways, right? Because you've got
Yeah,
internalized EQ, and that's an important data
yeah,
point, and then you've got externalized
yeah,
EQ, which is understanding what motivates the
yeah,
people that you're working with, right?
yeah.
Um, and getting because again, you've now got to think about your team in a critical way in the sense of, who gets it, who's performing, who needs support, right? What skills aren't there that we need to develop. So definitely that.
Cool. We made
Um,
EQ work really hard there. But that's cool.
we
What
have.
else? What else are we going to put into
Look,
this
I
cool
think
program
another
we're developing?
subject is what do we need to win, right? I think that's a mindset that you've got to get into very quickly. And I think that means a lot of things, right? You can boil that down to specific things in the pipeline, for example. So we've got a lot of mature deals at a certain stage. What do we need to do to win these, right? Um, that's one thing. But then, you know, what do we need to win in terms of, our proposition in the market, enhancements to the product, things like that as well. Because ultimately this is going to be your requests for investment from your management, right?
Oh, I love that. That's kind of like your blueprint almost from
Yeah,
the very
yeah,
start. Right, we're not even going to talk to these people because they're not right,
yeah.
because they're not who we'd want to win with. To okay, we're right. Very end. Have we done all the things? Oh, I love that one. Again, that's doing a lot of work. We're making these subjects cover tons. But anyway, good stuff.
Okay. Well,
Next
I've
one.
I've got the next two. So with your permission, I'm going to put two statements together in the next one, right? So you've got to have a combination of focus and finish and land and expand. Okay. So the focus and finish piece is you can put this in many areas, but it's basically, how can we catapult ourselves towards our target by absolutely laying down the top three things that we need to get done to either get deals across the board, um, or, again, in terms of thinking about the go-to-market, perhaps narrowing the aperture to be able to explode by absolutely focusing and finishing. Because, you can quite often find environments where there's a very sort of scatological shotgun approach to selling. Any deal will do, and that's not going to help you be successful. And then the land and expand thing is to ensure that you've got a proper, rigorous sales process across your existing customers or those that you've defined as key accounts so that you're not only defending them, but you're growing them.
Absolutely allowed to put those fuse those things together. We'll come
Perfect.
after this. I'll come up with a cool word which sort of encapsulates it all. But I'm
I
loving
love
the
it.
thinking in there. And then the last one.
The last one, I would say big bets.
Oh,
So again, what I'm kind of in opposition to is this kind of financial year to financial year survival. So what are the big bets that will either open up new opportunity or new revenue? So, one of these could be bringing a more data-driven approach to prioritizing product enhancements, for example, right? So what is the voice of the market? What are the numbers of the market combined to, whatever the total monetary opportunity is? And being able to bring that into departments like product, say these are absolute priorities and they're going to deliver X, right? And then equally, it could be, so for example, in my business, in my world, opening up activities in a new country, what would that mean? And what conversations have we had to corroborate that there is an opportunity there? So often this is requiring prioritization and investment from the business, but they could be transformational. So what are your big bets?
what? awesome 5 things. And very unfair of me to only give 5 minutes. I mean, it's kind of like 5 podcasts, or indeed a book full of this stuff.
There you go.
Fancy that. No,
See
no.
that.
But cool. So book is available on Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah, wherever you
Um,
get books.
okay.
Yes, Amazon. I think it's on Apple, Google, many other places as
All of
well.
this. Okay, I'm just thinking one link to drop in show notes that's easiest for people. So probably that.
Right.
I know the people who don't like Bezos will have to find it somewhere else. But it's the cultural sales leader.
Thank you.
And where can people get in touch with you? Because hopefully
Yeah, so
there is
I
some
have a
thinking here
website.
that they might want
Yeah,
to
no, I really
expand.
appreciate it. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. It's excellent meeting you. Um, so richardcogswell.com, very simply, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Very happy to give you my profile there. And you'll see obviously my professional profile on there, but I'm also talking about a lot of these topics in terms of content and what have you as well.
Brilliant. 3 links into the show notes so that people can find those dead easy. If you connect, mention that you heard Richard talking to us here on Sales Today. But Richard, absolutely brilliant. I'm really pleased we've had a chance to have a conversation.
Thank you
Tons
so
in
much.
there, and I'm sure we'll probably be chatting again at some stage.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much, Fred.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the collaborative selling scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.